Across the vast and vibrant continent of Africa, a profound transformation is underway. In nations like Burkina Faso and Mali, young military leaders, Captain Ibrahim Traoré and Colonel Assimi Goïta, are not merely governing, they are igniting a fervent sense of hope and defiance among their people. They are celebrated by the masses, their images emblazoned on banners, their words echoing through crowded squares. Yet, in the gilded halls of global power, these same leaders are met with apprehension, condemnation, and thinly veiled threats. This stark contrast is not an accident of history, nor a mere political anomaly. It is the visible manifestation of a deeper, hidden plan, a long unwritten verdict now being read aloud by the very people it sought to silence. This report is not a fleeting news dispatch. It is a full investigation, a journey into the spiritual, historical, and geopolitical currents that have shaped Africa's destiny for over a century. It seeks to expose the intricate web of colonial systems, the relentless pursuit of resource control, and the seismic power shifts that define this moment. Nothing in this world happens by chance. Every event is a link in a chain, forged in the fires of a colonial past and now, perhaps, on the cusp of being broken. The true reasons why Western powers desire the removal of these leaders, why France is losing its grip, and why a new generation of African leaders is rising are about to be laid bare. This is the full map, the deception and the resistance. 2. The enduring chains, a century of colonial legacy. To understand the present, one must confront the past. The current dynamics in the Sahel are direct consequences of a colonial system designed not for development, but for perpetual extraction and control. The illusion of independence, French colonial footprint. The roots of the current struggle stretch back to the late 19th century, when European powers carved up Africa at the Berlin Conference. What is now Burkina Faso, then known as Upper Volta, became a French protectorate in 1896, with conquest continuing for years against local resistance. Similarly, Mali, as French Sudan, was declared a French colony by 1892, losing all semblance of autonomy. French became the language of administration and schooling, and the indigenous populations faced severe oppression, even simple acts like picking fruit being forbidden to African children. Nominal independence arrived in 1960 for both nations. However, this independence was largely an illusion. France, unable to rule its African colonies as before, recognized their sovereignty on the condition that local elites remained subordinate to French interests. This arrangement ensured favorable trade and development deals for French companies and maintained French influence over monetary policy and military access. The infrastructure, energy, and transportation sectors of many African countries became heavily reliant on French multinational corporations like Total Energies and Bolloré, solidifying economic dependency. The CFA Franc, a monetary straitjacket.
One of the most potent instruments of continued French control is the CFA Franc. This currency, used by 14 African nations, including Mali and Burkina Faso, is backed by the French treasury. It maintains a fixed exchange rate with the euro, previously the French franc, and requires member countries to centralize a significant portion of their foreign exchange reserves with the French treasury. Immediately following independence, this figure stood at 100%, later at 65%.
Critics argue that the CFA franc system is a neocolonial device that actively undermines the monetary sovereignty of African nations and hinders economic development. It is seen as a barrier to industrialization and structural transformation, failing to stimulate trade integration among user nations. The credit to GDP ratio in the West African Economic and Monetary Union (WEMU) zone, which includes Mali and Burkina Faso, stands at a mere 25%, significantly lower than the 60% plus average for sub-Saharan Africa. This indicates a severe lack of bank lending to these economies. Furthermore, the system encourages massive capital outflows, contributing to poverty and underemployment. A striking 11 of its 15 adherents are classified as least developed countries, LDCs. While proponents claim the CFA franc ensures stability and low inflation, the counter-argument is that this comes at the cost of weak economic growth and fewer job opportunities. Nations like Morocco, Tunisia, and Algeria, which withdrew from the franc zone and minted their own currencies post-independence, are now economically stronger than any current user of the CFA franc, demonstrating that true monetary independence can lead to greater prosperity. France-Afrique, maintaining control through covert means. Beyond monetary policy, France has maintained its influence through a complex network known as France-Afrique. This system involves institutional structures in both France and Africa, tightly tied to the French president's office and French undercover services. After independence, France frequently supported authoritarian governments that served its interests, backing dictators and influencing elections, particularly during the Cold War, when many African leaders were seen as client states. The Élysée Palace regularly meddled in African politics through military incursions, covert operations, and diplomacy. France conducted numerous military interventions under the guise of preserving stability, often in cooperation with the United Nations or regional African organizations. Notable examples include Operation Serval 2013 in Mali, aimed at countering Islamist insurgencies, and Operation Barkhane since 2014, encompassing Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. Despite recent resentment, French military bases persist in nations like Gabon, Senegal, and Djibouti. This persistent military presence, coupled with economic leverage, ensured that even with flags of independence flying, true sovereignty remained elusive. 3. The resource curse, fueling Western appetites. Africa is a continent of immense wealth, a treasure trove of critical minerals essential for the global economy. This abundance, however, has often been a curse, attracting external powers whose primary interest lies in extraction rather than equitable development. Africa's untold wealth, gold, uranium, lithium, and rare minerals. Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger sit atop vast reserves of highly sought-after minerals. Mali is rich in gold and lithium, while Niger is a significant producer of uranium. Burkina Faso also possesses substantial gold deposits. These resources, gold for financial markets, uranium for nuclear energy, and lithium and rare minerals for the burgeoning technology and green energy sectors, are strategically vital for industrialized nations. In 2022, mines in West Africa alone accounted for a quarter of all European Union uranium imports. The mechanics of resource theft: who benefits? The core question of who benefits from Africa staying weak finds its answer in the continuous, systematic extraction of these resources. The colonial legacy ensured that the infrastructure and legal frameworks favored foreign corporations. The CFA Franc system, by undermining monetary sovereignty and hindering industrialization, further ensured that African nations remained primarily exporters of raw materials, unable to process their own wealth or command fair prices. This economic dependency, perpetuated through debt and structural adjustment programs imposed by Western-directed institutions like the IMF, has allowed multinational corporations to extract immense wealth, enriching few in the underdeveloped countries while causing humanitarian, environmental, and ecological damage. The gold extracted often ends up in the coffers of foreign states, not the nations from which it is dug, directly contributing to the impoverished condition of the people and fueling migration. The shift in allegiance, new partners emerge. The current wave of military takeovers in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger has been accompanied by a decisive reorientation away from Western mining companies. These nations are actively seeking more equitable terms for their mineral resources. Niger, for example, has revoked the mining license for France's Orano to operate the Imuraren mine, one of the world's largest uranium mines. Burkina Faso has followed suit, expropriating key British-owned gold mines. Instead of the West, these countries are turning to alternative global powers like Russia, China, and Turkey for mining investment. China's state-owned Ganfeng, for instance, opened a lithium mine in Mali's southern region in December 2023. Russian private military companies are reportedly controlling gold and lithium mines and plan to control uranium mines. This shift is alarming to Western powers, as increased Russian control over West African uranium mines, combined with its influence over top producers like Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, could give Moscow control over 60% of the world's mine supply, potentially leading to energy vulnerability and market recession in Europe. The West's fear is rooted in the waning of its leverage over African countries, as African nations make independent choices and pursue relationships with non-Western partners. IFO, the Puppeteers and the Resistance, ECOWAS, and the Sahelian Uprising. The regional body, ECOWAS, established with the mission of economic integration, has found itself at the center of the recent upheavals, its authority challenged and its independence questioned. ECOWAS, a tool of external influence? The Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, has consistently condemned the military coups in Mali and Burkina Faso, imposing sanctions and suspending their memberships. However, ECOWAS's response has been met with significant criticism and a perception of double standards. Many West Africans, particularly the youth, view ECOWAS as an elitist institution that represents the interests of regional leaders rather than its citizens, and is perceived as being too aligned with foreign powers, particularly Western nations. The sanctions imposed by ECOWAS, such as those on Mali for delaying elections, have often backfired, increasing popular support for the military juntas due to resentment towards the measures, which disproportionately affect ordinary citizens. This perceived disconnection from the grievances of the populace, coupled with its inability to effectively address the root causes of instability, poor governance, insecurity, and economic hardship, has damaged ECOWAS's image and emboldened transitional military authorities. The Sahelian coup, a symptom of deeper discontent. The wave of coups across the Sahel, including the two in Burkina Faso in 2022 and those in Mali in 2020 and 2021, are not isolated incidents but symptoms of deep-seated internal discontent. The primary drivers include escalating jihadist violence and mounting public outrage over the inability of civilian governments to ensure security, coupled with widespread corruption and poor governance. In Burkina Faso, public frustration with the government's failure to curb extremist violence was a key factor in Traoré's takeover. In Mali, Goïta's 2021 coup stemmed from tensions over a cabinet reshuffle, with the military accusing the transitional government of trying to sabotage the transition. These coups reflect a broader disillusionment with Western-style democracy, which many young Africans feel has failed to deliver opportunities or improve their living standards. Surveys in Burkina Faso indicate a significant increase in acceptance of military rule, with almost 2/3 believing the army should intervene when leaders abuse power. This suggests that the military takeovers are not simply power grabs but a reaction to perceived failures of the established political and economic institutions. The Alliance of Sahel States, AES, a Pan-African response. In a decisive move that challenges ECOWAS's authority, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger formed the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, in September 2023. This mutual defense pact, finalized as a confederation in July 2024, aims to address shared challenges and threats. Its core objectives include mutual defense and assistance, counter-terrorism, prevention of armed rebellions, and crucially, economic and political emancipation. The AES signifies a strong assertion of autonomy and a reduction of dependence on external powers. It serves as a direct counterbalance to pressures from regional blocs like ECOWAS, which had threatened military intervention. The formation of the AES and the subsequent withdrawal of its members from ECOWAS in January 2024 represent a significant fragmentation of regional cooperation, severely limiting ECOWAS's deterrent capability. This alliance embodies a burgeoning African consciousness that questions Western edicts and seeks to reclaim the continent's own voice, demonstrating a growing desire for African solutions to African problems. Vive echoes of the past. The spirit of resistance endures. The rise of Captain Ibrahim Traoré and Colonel Assimi Goïta is not an isolated phenomenon but a continuation of a long and often tragic history of African leaders who dared to challenge the neocolonial order. Their stories resonate deeply with the struggles of past Pan-African giants.
Thomas Sankara, the Incorruptible pioneer. Thomas Sankara, who renamed Upper Volta to Burkina Faso, land of incorruptible people, in 1984, was a revolutionary leader whose foreign policy centered on radical anti-imperialism. He famously rejected loans and capital from organizations like the International Monetary Fund, viewing them as tools of dependency. Sankara focused on self-sufficiency, implementing domestic policies that included famine prevention, agrarian expansion, and nationwide literacy and vaccination campaigns. He combated desertification by planting millions of trees and enforced social reforms like the prohibition of female circumcision and forced marriages.
Sankara's defiance of Western powers, particularly France, was direct and uncompromising. He criticized French President François Mitterrand for hosting apartheid South African leader P.W. Botha and UNITA's Jonas Savimbi, referring to them as covered in blood from head to toe. In response, France drastically cut its economic aid to Burkina Faso. Sankara's revolutionary programs, while popular with the majority of his citizens, alienated elements of the former ruling class and the governments of France and its allies. He was assassinated in 1987, a fate many attribute to his anti-imperialist stance. His legacy of self-reliance and anti-corruption deeply influences the current generation of leaders. Patrice Lumumba, the unforgivable nationalist. Patrice Lumumba, the first prime minister of the independent Belgian Congo in 1960, was a fierce nationalist and Pan-Africanist. The Democratic Republic of Congo, where he served, is considered the richest country in Africa in terms of mineral resources, including vast deposits of copper, cobalt, diamonds, and uranium. Lumumba was committed to maintaining the country's unity, especially its mineral-rich Katanga province, which attempted to secede. When his appeals to the United Nations, the United States, and Western powers for help to restore order failed, Lumumba turned to the Soviet Union. This move led to accusations of communism from Belgium and the United States, despite his declaration, "We are not communist Catholics or socialists, we are African nationalists." Within 10 weeks of being elected, Lumumba's government was deposed in a coup. He was subsequently imprisoned and assassinated on January 17, 1961, by Western powers. The United States, Belgium, France, England, and the United Nations, in collusion with local leaders. His body was dissolved in acid to hide the crime. Lumumba's death sent a chilling message to any African leader who dared to assert full control over their nation's resources. Muammar Gaddafi, the Pan-African visionary. Muammar Gaddafi, who ruled Libya from 1969 until his assassination in 2011, evolved from a Pan-Arabist to a staunch Pan-Africanist. Frustrated by the Arab world's reluctance to challenge Western dictates, he increasingly emphasized Libya's African identity, advocating for a United States of Africa with a single currency, common defense system, and unified passport. He became a founder of the African Union, AU, and served as its chairperson from 2009 to 2010, consistently urging African states to reject conditional aid from the developed world. Gaddafi's downfall in 2011 during the Arab Spring was triggered by protests against corruption and unemployment, but it escalated into a civil war with direct NATO military intervention. Western powers, particularly France, were instrumental in supporting the anti-Gaddafi forces. Critics viewed this intervention as an imperialist attempt to control Libya's vast oil resources and prevent Gaddafi's vision of a unified, economically independent Africa from materializing. His assassination by rebel forces backed by French Secret Service marked a brutal end to a leader who had become a symbol of Pan-African defiance against Western hegemony. The unbroken thread, from past martyrs to present leaders. The tragic fates of Sankara, Lumumba, and Gaddafi serve as stark warnings, yet also as powerful inspirations. These men were not merely leaders, they were embodiments of an African aspiration for true sovereignty and self-determination. Their attempts to reclaim national resources, assert monetary independence, and forge Pan-African unity directly challenged the neocolonial order, leading to their violent removal. The current generation of leaders, like Traoré and Goïta, are seen by the masses as picking up this unbroken thread of resistance. Their anti-imperialist rhetoric, their rejection of the CFA Franc, their expulsion of foreign military forces, and their pursuit of new alliances are not new ideas but echoes of the struggles waged by their predecessors. This historical continuity explains why the people celebrate them strategically, recognizing their actions as a direct continuation of the fight for true liberation. They are seen as fulfilling the unwritten verdict that Africa must control its own destiny and its own wealth. 6. The Awakening, a spiritual and Pan-African rebirth. The current political and economic shifts in the Sahel are not solely material struggles. They are inextricably linked to a profound spiritual and cultural awakening across Africa. This resurgence of identity is a crucial, often overlooked dimension of the ongoing decolonization process. Spiritual liberation as a prerequisite for political sovereignty. For centuries, colonial and missionary regimes systematically suppressed, vilified, and outlawed African spiritual systems and cultural practices. This was not a casual imposition but a deliberate act of spiritual gentrification designed to create a psychological dependency and an identity crisis among African societies. By branding indigenous beliefs as pagan or witchcraft and promoting imported religions, colonial powers sought to dismantle African cultural frameworks, incapacitating societies and stripping away their ability to resist ongoing domination. The Bible, for instance, was weaponized to justify the theft of land, culture, and freedom, twisting scripture to preach obedience to colonizers. However, a powerful cultural renaissance is now sweeping across the continent and the diaspora. This movement is a decolonizing of the mind and spirit, an unlearning of oppressive narratives, and a relearning of the beauty of African heritage. It is a reclaiming of stolen gods and ancestral roots, fueled by a yearning to reconnect with what was lost. This spiritual liberation is not merely a cultural trend. It is a fundamental strategic act of decolonization. The psychological and spiritual subjugation was a tool for broader control, and therefore spiritual liberation is essential for achieving genuine political and economic independence. By rejecting imposed beliefs and reclaiming their authentic identity, Africans become less susceptible to external manipulation and more resilient in their pursuit of self-determination. This is a profound recognition that the fight for land and resources is inseparable from the fight for identity and soul.
Pan-Africanism reborn, the youth as the vanguard. Pan-Africanism, the spirit of unity and solidarity among all indigenous peoples and diasporas of African ancestry, is experiencing a new golden age. This resurgence is evident in popular uprisings, military coups, and even electoral shifts that bring anti-imperialist leaders to power. This new wave advocates for African sovereignty, prioritizing African interests in trade and diversifying economic and political partners away from former colonial masters. The future of Africa rests squarely in the hands of its youth. Disillusioned with the failures of Western-style democracy and the moral bankruptcy of capitalism that has led to flailing economies and a lack of opportunities, young Africans are actively seeking alternatives. They are the vanguard of this movement, possessing the numbers, the consciousness, and the resources to challenge the status quo. Their tasks are clear: a return to cultural traditions, language, ancestors, and spirituality. A rewriting of true African history, refuting the lies taught by colonizers, a challenge to the values and worldviews of imperialists, an expulsion of all foreign interests that exploit the continent's resources, and an unwavering commitment to ensuring Africa's wealth benefits Africans. This collective consciousness of "I am because we are" is becoming the rallying cry for unity, emphasizing that the total liberation of Africa can only be won by the working masses themselves.
Captain Traoré, the torch-bearer. In this new golden age of Pan-Africanism, Captain Ibrahim Traoré has emerged as the undisputed face and torch-bearer of global Pan-African resistance. His rise and rapidly growing popularity defy conventional political logic. At 37, he appeals directly to the youth, who see him as understanding their challenges and confronting the irrelevance of the old guard and regional institutions such as ECOWAS.
Traoré's anti-imperialist stance, his efforts to deconstruct colonial mindsets, and his assertion of Burkina Faso's sovereignty resonate deeply. He has severed ties with former colonial ruler France, pivoted towards Russia and Turkey, and initiated anti-corruption drives, aiming to take greater control of Burkina Faso's mineral riches. His popularity extends far beyond Burkina Faso's borders, inspiring solidarity rallies across Africa and the diaspora under banners like "Hands off Captain Ibrahim Traoré," "Hands off Burkina Faso." This widespread support is not merely emotional. It is a strategic, deeply informed choice by people who recognize his actions as embodying the spirit of genuine African liberation and a rejection of centuries of oppression. He is seen as a leader who understands that the fight for economic and political independence is inseparable from the fight for cultural identity and spiritual reclamation. 7th, the Unwritten Verdict. A call to arms, the warning.
This is not a movie, a distant news report, or a mere geopolitical shift to be observed from afar. This is a war, a relentless, multifaceted struggle for Africa's future, fought on economic, political, and spiritual fronts. The stakes could not be higher, for the outcome will determine the destiny of a continent and indeed the balance of global power. The violence in the Sahel, the humanitarian crises, the displacement of millions. These are not accidental consequences, but direct results of this ongoing conflict. The deception. The enemy is insidious, a system of fake independence that keeps Africa tethered to its former colonizers, manipulated narratives that demonize true African agency, and the continued systematic exploitation of Africa's unparalleled wealth and human potential. The CFA Franc, with its monetary straitjacket, is a prime example of this economic grip.
The military interventions, often under the pretense of stability, and the regional bodies like ECOWAS, perceived as puppet structures serving external interests, are all tools in this ongoing deception designed to maintain control while masking the true motives of resource theft and strategic dominance. Western media, for too long the gatekeepers of African truth, have crafted perceptions through a Western lens, portraying the continent as perpetually in need of intervention while obscuring the true motives of their own nations. The call to action. The unwritten verdict has been read aloud by the people. Now it is time to act.
Wake up! See the full map of this deception. Understand the hidden motives behind every headline, every intervention, every condemnation. Recognize that the celebration of leaders like Traoré and Goïta by the masses is a strategic, deeply informed choice, a verdict against centuries of oppression and a demand for genuine sovereignty. This is not about supporting military rule for its own sake, but about recognizing the profound rejection of a system that has failed to deliver true independence and prosperity. Support the truth. Reject the lies spun by Western media and their proxies. Stand unequivocally with those who fight for genuine sovereignty, who dare to reclaim their resources, and who embody the spirit of Pan-African liberation. Your voice, your awareness, your solidarity are weapons in this war. Publicly and through social media, support leaders who clearly intend to unite Africa and reclaim it from colonial and imperialistic powers. Demand the removal of all foreign interests that exploit the nation and its natural resources. Unite. The path to true freedom lies in collective consciousness and unwavering unity. This is the moment for a truly free, self-determined and prosperous Africa to rise from the ashes of neocolonialism, guided by its own vision for its own people. There can be no compromise in this process. Unity is essential. Dedicate all thoughts and actions to African solidarity, the key to African reincarnation. The unwritten verdict has been read. Now it is time to act.